I'm not even sure why I'm putting this down in words. Maybe if it's on a screen instead of bouncing around in my skull, it'll stop replaying on a loop. Maybe not. The department shrink says talking helps, but talking turns into paperwork, and paperwork turns into things being filed away and forgotten. This isn't that. This is just me trying to pin the memory in place long enough to look at it without it looking back. My name is Frank Keegan. For 12 years, I was a patrol officer with the Chicago PD. I say was because I'm on indefinite administrative leave. They call it leave. It feels more like a cage. They took my badge and my service weapon. They want me to see Dr. Albright twice a week and not talk to anyone about what happened. But they can't stop me from typing. This isn't for attention. God, no. I have to tell someone the real story. Not the bullshit report about a gas line explosion and a vicious animal attack. If you're reading this, please just read it. You don't have to believe me. Most days I don't believe myself. But the memory is there, burned onto the back of my eyelids like a flashbulb. And there's the footage, my body cam file. They have the original, but I made a copy. I watch it sometimes, in the dark, when the whiskey isn't working. I watch it to remind myself I'm not crazy. It was a Tuesday in October. The sky was the color of a dirty puddle, and the wind coming off the lake had teeth. It was the kind of shift that feels like it's been going on for a week. Nothing but petty domestics, shoplifters at the corner store, and fender benders. My partner, Ben Rivas, and I were about 2 hours from end of shift, dreaming of beer and hot food when the call came over the radio.
All units in Sector 4 report of a 415, possible domestic violence at 1121 West Industrial Avenue. Caller reports screaming from a third-floor apartment. Advise caution. Building is listed as condemned.
Ben and I looked at each other. A 415 is a disturbance. Standard stuff. But the address was a joke. West Industrial Avenue wasn't an avenue. It was a graveyard of warehouses and factories from a time when the city actually made things. The specific address, 1121, was a place we all knew. The Kensington Arms. A 10-story brick monstrosity that had been empty for at least 20 years. It was slated for demolition, but the city kept running out of money, so it just sat there, rotting.
Squatters, probably.
Ben muttered, putting the car in gear.
Kid gets a little too rough with his girlfriend, and she calls it in.
In a condemned building? I said. Who the hell is living in the Kensington?
You'd be surprised, Frank. People find a way.
Ben was a good cop. Younger than me, still had some of that righteous fire. He believed we could actually make a difference. Me? I was just trying to make it to my pension without getting shot or having a heart attack. The drive over was quiet. The usual city landscape of brick apartments and convenience stores slowly melted away. The streetlights became fewer and farther between. The buildings got lower, uglier, scarred with graffiti and neglect. This was the edge of the map, the part of the city that had been forgotten. The Kensington Arms stood out against the bruised sky like a rotten tooth. We pulled up and killed the lights. The place looked even worse up close. Every window was either boarded up or a gaping black hole. The front doors were long gone, leaving an entrance that looked like a mouth. A strange smell hit me the moment I opened the car door. It wasn't the usual smell of urban decay, piss and garbage and wet concrete. This was something else. It was thick, greasy, and sweet, like a butcher shop that had lost power for a week in July.
Jesus.
Ben coughed, pulling his collar over his nose.
What is that?
I don't know and I don't want to know, I grunted, pulling my maglite from my belt. Dispatch crackled again.
4 David 12, update on the 415. The caller is still on the line. She's whispering now. She says the screaming stopped. Now she hears a wet tearing sound. She's very agitated. Says the man who lives there isn't a man.
Ben and I exchanged another look. The "not a man" comment was a classic sign of either heavy drugs or serious mental illness. Still, it put a little needle of ice in my gut. 4 David 12, copy that, I said into my shoulder mic. We're on scene, making entry. We approached the building, our boots crunching on broken glass. The smell was stronger here, a physical presence that coated the back of my throat. We stepped through the gaping doorway into the lobby. It was like stepping into a tomb. The air was cold and dead. Our flashlight beams cut through the darkness, illuminating piles of trash, fallen plaster, and the ghost of a grand marble floor now covered in filth. A single, steady drip of water from somewhere in the ceiling was the only sound.
Chicago PD!
Ben's voice boomed, echoing in the vast space.
Anyone in here?
Only the drip answered. We found the stairwell. The metal door had been torn off its hinges. The stairs went up into absolute blackness.
3rd floor. You ready? Ben asked.
Let's get this over with, I said. We started up, taking it slow. The stairs groaned under our weight. The air got thicker, the smell more intense with every floor we climbed. On the 2nd floor landing, my light caught something on the wall. Scratches. Long, deep gouges in the plaster and brick, running parallel to each other. What do you make of that? I asked, running my finger over one of the grooves. It was deep. Too deep for fingernails.
Big dog?
Ben suggested, though he didn't sound convinced.
Maybe the squatter has a pit bull.
A pit bull with claws like a damn velociraptor, I muttered. We kept climbing. The 3rd floor hallway was a long, dark tunnel. Most of the apartment doors were gone. We swept our lights down the hall. 3A, 3C, 3D, all just empty, dark squares. But 3B, at the far end of the hall, was different. It had a door. A heavy, metal-plated door that was slightly ajar. The smell was pouring out of that opening like a physical thing. We approached cautiously, weapons drawn. Now I could hear it. The sound the dispatcher mentioned. A low, rhythmic tearing, and a crunching, like someone chewing on ice, only deeper, more resonant. This is it, Ben whispered, his hand on the door. I nodded, my heart starting to thrum against my ribs. Chicago police, open up, I shouted, my voice sounding small in the oppressive silence. The tearing sound stopped. Complete silence. My ears were ringing. I could hear my own breathing, loud and ragged inside my head. Ben and I held our positions for a full minute. Nothing. All right, I said, my voice low. On 3. 1, 2. Ben shoved the door open and we swung in, flashlights leading the way, sweeping the room. What I saw wasn't a home. It was a lair, a nest. The floor was invisible beneath a carpet of garbage, shredded clothing, and bones. My God, the bones. They were everywhere. Piled in corners, scattered across the floor. They were small, mostly birds, rats, a few cats. But there were bigger ones, too. Dog skulls. Lots of them. Rib cages picked clean. The furniture was obliterated, torn down to the springs and splintered wood. The walls were covered in those same deep, gouging scratch marks. The smell was a solid wall. It was blood, old and new, feces, rot. And under it all, a wild, musky scent, the smell of a predator.
Clear left,
Ben said, his voice tight. Clear right, I responded. The main room was empty. A small kitchenette was off to the side, also destroyed. A hallway led deeper into the apartment. The crunching sound had come from back there. We moved down the hall, stepping over piles of filth. The layout was a standard 2-bedroom. The door to the first bedroom was missing. We shined our lights inside, more of the same. A sea of trash and bones. The second bedroom door, at the end of the hall, was closed. The sound
had come from there. I felt a cold dread creeping up my spine. Every cop instinct I had was screaming at me to get out, to call for backup, for SWAT, for the goddamn National Guard. This was wrong, all of it. Ben took point. He put his hand on the doorknob. He looked back at me, his eyes wide in the beam of my flashlight. I gave him a curt nod. He turned the knob. It was unlocked. He pushed the door open slowly. Our combined flashlight beams sliced into the darkness of the back bedroom. And that's when we saw him. Or it. It was hunched in the far corner, its back mostly to us. It was huge, taller than a man even crouched down. It was emaciated, its ribs starkly visible under a coat of patchy, grayish fur. Its limbs were long, too long, and bent at odd angles. It looked vaguely canine, like a wolf ravaged by disease, but the proportions were all wrong. The back legs were jointed like a man's, and its shoulders were broad and powerful. And its hands, they weren't paws. They were hands. Gnarled, 5-fingered hands with long, yellowed claws where the nails should be. It was hunched over something on the floor, something that had once been a German shepherd from the look of the fur. The creature was pulling strips of meat from the carcass with its hands and stuffing them into a long, narrow snout. The wet, tearing, crunching sound filled the room. For a second, my brain just refused to process what I was seeing. It was a trick of the light. It was a guy in a suit. It was a hallucination from the god-awful smell. Then it turned its head. It moved slowly, deliberately, the vertebrae in its long neck cracking audibly. The head was long and lupine, but the face was a grotesque parody of something almost human. The eyes were what broke me. They weren't animal eyes. They were set forward in its skull, not on the sides. And they were intelligent. They glowed a faint, sickly yellow in our lights, and they were filled with a terrifying, calculated hatred. Blood and viscera dripped from its jaws. It didn't roar. It didn't growl. It made a series of low, rapid clicks from the back of its throat. A sound of pure, alien menace.
Police, show me your hands!
Ben's voice cracked. The absurdity of the command hung in the air. The creature slowly, deliberately, placed the piece of meat it was holding onto the floor. It rose from its crouch, and it just kept rising. It was easily 7 feet tall. Its wiry arms hung down past its knees. It stood on its digitigrade legs, balanced and ready. It was not a man. It was not an animal. It was something else. And then it moved. It wasn't a charge. It was too smart for that. It exploded sideways, a blur of gray fur and bone. It scrambled up the wall, its claws finding purchase in the plaster, and scurried across the ceiling like some horrific insect. It was impossibly fast.
Jesus Christ!
Ben screamed and fired. The roar of his 9mm Glock was deafening in the small room. I saw 2 rounds punch into the creature's flank. It barely flinched. It let out a high-pitched shriek, a sound of fury, not pain, and launched itself off the ceiling, not at us, but towards the darkened doorway of the bedroom. I fired 2, 3 quick shots. I know I hit it. I saw the impacts. It was like shooting a sack of concrete. It landed in the hallway with a heavy thud and vanished into the darkness.
"It's in the hall!" I yelled. "Back out! Back out now!"
We stumbled backwards out of the bedroom, guns trained on the dark hallway. We couldn't see it, but we could hear it. A low, guttural breathing, the scrape of its claws on the floorboards. We got back to the main room.
We need to get out of here.
Ben said, his voice trembling. He was fumbling with his radio.
4 David 12 to dispatch. Shots fired. Shots fired. We have a hostile. Jesus, send backup. Officer needs assistance.
As he was talking,